All right. 3, 2.
Fuck.
Welcome back to episode 9 of the True Love Tattoo Podcast. Sorry about last week. It just wasn't postable. It was a fucking dog's breakfast. But we're back, and the one thing this episode has in common with all the other ones is that it's also sponsored by Killer Merch. They've sponsored the entire season, even the unpostable episode. They sponsored it anyway because they are fucking good dudes. Today, we're very lucky. My guest, we've name dropped him a few times in previous episodes. He's flown in specifically for this episode and he's about to fly out straight after. He's the man behind Little Tokyo, Black Market Tattoo Supplies, and Australian tattoo history. It's Mr. Reese Gordon. Thanks for joining me, Reese.
Oh, my pleasure. It's, honoured to be here.
An honour.
Yep, totally. It's nice to see, someone of, the younger generation giving back to tattooing. So, I wouldn't have missed this opportunity for anything.
Prepare for disappointment.
Well, I built my career on it.
So, Reese, you've been tattooing what seems like forever.
Yeah, I think I'm coming into 29, probably, it's probably 30 years, but I counted it as about 29. I've just turned 46. 1990, I was finishing high school in year 12, doing my HSC, and I was tattooing pretty much 4 nights a week after school and weekends. Year 11, probably half that pace, and into year 10, probably a quarter of that.
So to clarify, you were a 16-year-old tattooing people.
Correct, yes.
How the fuck does that happen?
For me, I was very fortunate. A friend of my father's was a tattoo artist, a guy called Tattoo Charlie. He was like a cool, he still is a cool, like ex-Sharpie, tow truck driver, Garbo, jailbird, tough guy, all of these amazing things rolled into one.
Yeah.
And he looked like Rod Stewart. He's a cool cat. So he would always, not always, but visit our house and blah, blah, blah. I'd chat away with him, show my interest in tattoos, and he just didn't think I was serious. And then I let him know that I'd gotten a tattoo. I got my first tattoo. I'd just turned 15 and I probably looked about 11 from a guy called Jeff Wilson who ran Body Language back in the day.
Right.
And that was a shop in Lilydale, and that was what I knew as the best shop in town then.
Here in Melbourne?
Yeah, out in Lilydale. So we would, I was in the northern suburbs, we'd get the train across, or some older dude, you'd jump in the back seat of his car, go over, and I remember going into that shop. It was Jeff Wilson and Gary Mooney working there. There was like a hot rod out the front, a Porsche, like an airbrush front window, all these mad designs, smell of disinfectant, AC/DC playing, tough guys, tough girls, just like
the quintessential tattoo shop.
Yeah, a magical world. So I got tattooed by Jeff, and I remember him, I'd been there a few times before with my mates. Finally, my turn, I got tattooed. All right, today's the day. So I'm just going to get an outline, and I remember him going, "How old are you, mate?" I go, "I'm 18. And then he goes to me, "Don't tell your mum where you got it done." All right, mate. So that was it. But I got my start with Tattoo Charlie. So once he knew I was tattooed, next time he was over, he brought me a bunch of designs. There were some old S&W designs, and I'd redrew them and coloured them. And then from there, I'd start hanging out with him after school on weekends. He was like what would be called a backyard operator, or now a private studio.
Right.
He had a 2-bedroom unit in a suburb called Reservoir. It was growing like dope crops out the back. One room was like, turned into a tattoo studio. And I think somewhere on my Instagram or website, there's some old photos. His partner at the time was a nurse, so he had a really good setup for backyarding. It definitely wasn't dirty and scummy and that sort of thing. And he instilled into me cleanliness. So it was good. So, I got my start with Charlie, and I was with him for quite a few years. Then his life went in a different direction and I went my way. So I remember, I think maybe 19, I was still living in Reservoir, and then I started tattooing out of my bedroom.
Yeah.
So as you do, and I had like a big dentist chair in there and, a double bed. So people would be smoking bongs, drinking beers, and I'd be tattooing. They're doing that on my bed and I'm tattooing, and then I'm like, oh, really? And, I hadn't gone and got tattooed by anybody else at that stage apart from Charlie. Then I did a trip to the Gold Coast. A mate of mine, we drove up to Brisbane and went to some bike gang called Odin's Warriors. We drove up and went to the Odin's Warriors tattoo show. And I saw Paul Braniff there, a guy called Dwayne Cash, Little Mick. And at that same time, I went and got a couple of small tattoos on my collarbone from Tony Ranger. So then I'm back and I was a printer at the same time. So I was working night shift printing and then I'd be tattooing during the day or the weekend. So
like working in a printery?
Yeah, print shop. I did a printing apprenticeship.
Yeah, right.
So then one of the guys in that print shop, an old guy called Kat, he was like covered in tattoos and he's like, oh, here on the grapevine, you're tattooing. And back then you didn't really admit to it because you were scared your door was going to get kicked in.
Yeah.
And you get bashed and your stuff taken away. So blah, blah, blah. I said yes. And then he's like, oh, my mate's got a shop. He's looking for somebody, so maybe you want to go and meet him. So I'm like, all right, two things are going to happen. I'm going to get bashed or I've got a chance of getting a job.
Yeah.
So I was pretty trusting and naive as well. I'm like 19. So I took down all my machines, my designs, photos of my stuff, even needles and needle bars to show him that I could make needles.
Yeah.
And he's gone, okay, cool, blah, blah, blah. I want you to bring someone in and tattoo him. So I got a guy that I was tattooing and I did a JD Crow dragon on his shoulder blade, single needle outline and coloured it in with a 7 round. It was like the size of my hand.
So it was kind of like an audition.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Took about 3 hours and I had him, his cronies, other customers all standing over me at different times, breathing on my neck, all this sort of stuff. And I seemed to pass the test and pretty much, Kenny gave me the keys.
Yeah.
And I started then doing night shift. I used to work 3 in the afternoon till 9 at night. Then I'd drive from Brunswick to Dandenong and I'd work in a print shop from 10 at night till 6 in the morning. Then I'd drive home back. I was living in Moonee Ponds, go to sleep at 7, get up at 2 in the tattoo shop at 3 and did that for years, a couple of years.
Jesus.
So it was awesome.
Doing the night shift, I imagine you would have seen all sorts of fucking creatures come through.
Yeah, yes and no. Probably more creatures when I was at Skin Effects on the Gold Coast. Like
Right.
Brunswick back then, it was still pretty quiet. Like we were upstairs from Club X Adult Bookshop.
Yep.
So that was always fun. Like you'd see people walk up, obviously first floor, people walk up the stairs, look around and then ask if we had DVDs for sale or videos actually. And we go, yeah, what sort do you want?
Yeah.
And then like you take them out into a back room and go, what do you want, mate? Blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, I want like some sick stuff. Like, oh, mate, that's downstairs.
Yeah.
And embarrass them, all that sort of thing. But it was good because I used to tattoo the guy that was downstairs. So, he was young like me as well, like 19, 20. So he'd call me up and go, hey, I got 2 strippers in here. They're like buying dildos. Come on down. So I just walked straight in, down behind the counter, pretend I worked there.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, girls. How are you? Yeah, this is definitely one of our most popular items, and just great times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw on your Instagram story today that you stopped by Dynamic Tattoo, which I think we also may have referenced in a previous episode to visit Trev McStay.
Yeah.
And on your Instagram story, you said that you attribute so much in tattooing and just general life advice to him.
Yeah, totally. Trev's been one of the main influences in my life, whether he would want to admit it or not. But he's, I met Trev when I was 20 years of age. I got tattooed at his shop in Baronia by a guy called Paul Jeffries, who was a big mentor of Trevor's. Trevor had worked with Paul at Smiling Buddha in Canada in the late 80s. And this is before, overseas travel was fashionable. So, you didn't have a flight centre or an Instagram and this sort of thing. So,
like pen pal generation?
I think Trev actually was one of the first guys that actually travelled a lot early in the piece. And everyone used to correspond back then.
Yeah.
But I think he met Paul at a convention somewhere and said, I'd love to come and get a tattoo by you. And it just sort of went from there. And he spent 2 years there. So initially got tattooed by Paul at Trevor's shop. And then afterwards got Trevor to extend my half sleeve to 3/4. And he then reworked my upper arm. That was 95. At the end of 95, I went to the UK. But in that period of time, I'd go over on some Mondays a couple of times a month, and he'd sit me in the corner and I'd draw things, and then he'd give me little tasks, or then he'd look at my work, I'd take him photos or what I'd drawn, and just make me question things like, why did you do that? And I actually didn't even have an answer because it was just repeating something I'd seen. So he kind of taught me to start thinking.
Yeah.
And just because somebody's good or it's in a magazine, you don't have to copy it because they've done it. It actually doesn't really mean it is good.
Yeah.
So, and he's been like a strong influence, you know, throughout my career. Like a few years later, I was in the UK and the phone rings. I'm working in a shop up in Newmarket. Trev's on the phone. He's in Denmark doing a guest spot at Hennings and just called up to see how I was going. You know, he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
But he did. And so then I travelled for a long time. I came back early 2000s. He did my back piece when I was 34, 35. I've just turned 46. So around that period of time, I'd fly down, I'd stay with him. You know, him and his wife, Debbie, have opened up their house and their shop to so many tattooers over the years. I was lucky enough to be one of them, and just always sort of taken an interest in what I'm doing. Like all the big decisions I've made in life of moving shop, going here, opening a shop, changing location, I've always used Trev as a springboard. And, you know, even to this day, I'll ask him for advice. He's just a rock solid dude. I think some people think he's quite standoffish or gruff with people, but to me, he's got an amazing dry sense of humour.
Yeah.
But that's something that I've, you know, seen over a 20+ year period.
Totally. That's sort of what some people might find intimidating or gruff or whatever. I guess it's sort of, that was your introduction to tattooing. So you're well adjusted to those sort of characters coming into it at such a young age.
And when I was getting my arm done by Trev, he'd be like, all right, so do you want to ask any questions? And I'd be like, oh, not thinking I could.
Yeah.
You know, you're watching like a Hawkeye, how many drops of this and that and whatever, what needle that is, what size tube that is, trying to remember it. And he's gone, mate, you're spending money here. You're not like, you know, these other wankers that go, hey, mate, what colours are you using?
Yeah.
Like, and I get it because when I was learning from Tattoo Charlie, like my needle making process, the beginning of it was I got to count out 10 sets of 3 needles in groupings, 10 sets of 7s. You know, then maybe a month later I was allowed to put them in the needle jig. Then a month later, put the flux on them, put them on the needle bar, all this sort of thing. So it was, I think you felt, personally anyway, I felt like I earned the knowledge that was being passed on to me. And this goes with the tattoo history thing as well. Like back then, your craftsmanship was a direct correlation to the quality of the tattoo you were doing.
Yeah.
So if you made shit needles and you couldn't shoot a machine or mix colour, you did shit tattoos. So I've always enjoyed the learning process, or people giving you a little bit of knowledge. It's like, okay, you've made it a little bit closer to getting inside that circle now.
Yeah. I saw a video of you getting interviewed one time and you were talking about like the difference between starting then and people starting now. Is that, starting then, having to make your own equipment and all that sort of stuff. If it was shit, you were going to be shit.
100%.
If you couldn't draw, you couldn't tattoo. Whereas now, you don't need to know how to draw or sort of service your own equipment, and you can still do rad tattoos.
100%. But that at the same time, if those options were available to me back then, of course I would have taken them. Sailor Jerry would have taken them. Anyone would have taken them, you know. But cutting out all that technical aspect and craftsmanship side has allowed tattooing to grow into what it is now. You know, like I remember talking to Max Chader and him saying in the 90s the biggest revolution was gloves and a photocopier and then a stencil machine.
Yeah.
You know, now it's definitely got to be, this generation's, it's got to be Instagram, it's got to be iPads, all these sort of things. Pens, cartridges.
Yeah.
Seminars, podcasts. Yeah, they're the backbone of the industry now.
Oh, that's what I like to think.
Yeah, it's educational.
I remember a couple of years ago, might have been like 2 years ago, I came and visited you at Little Tokyo while I was in Sydney, and you're like, where are you staying? And I'm like, oh, I'm staying in Potts Point. And you're like, oh, sick. can
Yeah.
you deliver these down to Max's Tattoo Village for me? Because you're right around the corner from
Yeah.
it. And it was just some bottles of grey wash or whatever. And
Yeah.
you're like, give
To
it
Pete, Rocky.
Give it to Rocky, and he's going to tell you about Wally Hammond
Yep.
and Magic Orange. And
Yes.
I'm like, what the fuck are you on about? And then I went down there,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, hi, are you Rocky? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, Reese sent me down to give you these. And he's like, oh, cool. And he took them, and then within 5 minutes was telling me about this dude called Wally Hammond.
Yep.
And he's like taking his pants off,
Yep.
showing me this Magic Orange.
Yeah.
For the people listening, can you explain the Magic Orange?
The Magic Orange was, okay, Wally Hammond was like one of the first tattoo supply guys as well. Some of the tattooers from that era didn't really like him because he would sell machines. He made a really nice bent up style frame machine, but he had a little magical book with all the color codes. And his orange, the orange especially, was ground so fine that once you mixed it with those dispersing solutions, it would get in the skin quite easy.
Yeah,
and
because
stay solid.
it used to all be like solid pigment that people would mix their own inks
Yes.
as opposed to like buying
Yep.
pre-made,
Yep.
pre-mixed inks.
100%. There was no pre-mixed back then at all. So, you know, that orange went to Mike Malone. It went to Ed Hardy. I think even Waverley I think I saw on Waverley Colours maybe a year ago, or even Doug Hardy talking about it, this killer Australian orange.
Yeah.
And it all comes from Wally from, I can't remember, it was like a dye factory out in the western suburbs. So, and the story goes, Wally had this amazing book. He was going to give the magical Bible of colours to a guy called Dutchy. Wally went up to the Sunshine Coast. Oh, no, sorry. Wally did give the book to Dutchy, and then not long after, Dutchy passed away, and no one knows what happened to the book. They think it might have got thrown out because it wouldn't have looked like anything special.
Yeah.
So it might have just got lost in the mayhem.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Before you also mentioned that you moved to London
Yes.
to work.
Yep.
How old were you when you moved there?
21.
21.
Yep.
So
Yep.
still super young.
Yep. Why I did that, back then, most shops only had 2 people in them.
Yeah.
And I think in all of Melbourne, there were 10 shops. There was Flame and Guns in Brunswick, where I worked at. Colin Gow was up the road in, on the way to Broady, and it was called Golden Needle or Magic Needles. Vic Market Tattoo, Highline Tattoo, Flinders Street, probably, Lifelong Designs in Glenroy was Beans' shop. I think Gary Mooney might have started up, or not far off was going to start up Tattoo Magic in Fitzroy Street. So there weren't that many shops. The next one, you had Lilydale, a guy called Adam Brill did Full Bore in Springvale, and then you had Dandenong.
Yeah.
And that was sort of it. So there weren't the opportunities to move to a better shop or a new shop because there just wasn't the customer base.
Yeah.
You know, and people tended to just stay in a shop for a long time. So my deciding factor to travel overseas came out of an accident, basically. So I was working in a print shop, working at Kenny's in Sydney Road, Brunswick, and my dream was, I was like, all right, I'm about to finish my apprenticeship. I'd saved up 10 grand. I'm going to buy a VK Brock Commodore, and I'm going to go on the dole, and I'm going to tattoo. I'm just going to be a mad little bogan, what I was.
The dream.
Yeah, living my bogan dream. So I ended up having a car accident driving home from Dandenong. I had a HQ Monaro at the time, and I had a little shitbox Toyota Corolla that was my work car.
Yeah.
So I'm driving home, and I actually fell asleep behind the wheel, and I wiped that car out into a Toyota Supra. No insurance. So then, blah, blah, insurance company. I owned them something like 11 grand. I remember going into work, going to Kenny. Oh my God, what have I done? You know, that VK Commodore's not to go. And he just goes to me, mate, you're paying all these reverse phone charge calls to your mates in the UK. Why don't you go and visit them? He goes, fuck giving the insurance company that money. And I'm like, wow, light bulb.
Yeah.
Sweet. I'm going to go to London.
Yeah.
Kiss that thing goodbye. And I thought if I stay away for long enough, they'll wipe it. And they did, you know, and I came back like 8 years later from traveling.
Yeah.
And, you know, bless my mum, she did a, you know, whatever checks you do on it and found out that, yeah, they'd wiped it. So I came back scot-free.
That's amazing.
So that was why I actually travelled. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have done it, and I probably would be sitting in an outer suburb somewhere with a tattoo shop.
What did you learn from tattooing over in London?
That I was a minnow in the ocean.
Right.
You know, I kind of came from somewhere where, you know, you're starting to maybe get a little bit of notoriety and you feel comfortable in your area and the circles you're moving in and you're the tattoo guy. And, you know, I went to London. I left on Boxing Day 95, landed there, and it was dark and dreary and horrible. And I was just like, wow, I'm such a small fry. You know, again, no internet. So I went to the first public phone box I could find, got the yellow pages, looked up tattoo, ripped out the page, and there was probably half a column, maybe 15 shops in London in end of 95, started 96, started going around them, asking for jobs. And back then it was very seasonal. So winter would generally be 1 to 2 people in a shop, summer 2 to maybe 3. So had no job, so I spunked the 10 grand I'd spent in about 2 months. You know, I travelled around a bit, tattooing out of like backpacker squats and stuff. And then I got a phone call from a guy saying he had a job in a shop like an hour and a half out of London. So I went there and then, yeah, things just slowly evolved. I ended up staying away for 8 years in total.
That's crazy.
It was awesome. It was good.
And like while you were there, did you sort of get outside of London? Did you cruise around Europe a bit?
Yeah, I went around Europe. I did the whole backpacker dream. You know, I've been around Europe twice in combi camper van style stuff. You know, done all the running with the bulls and all the rest of it, all the festivals. Just had a really good time and, you know, lots of parties. It was just an era of, like I was living in a house with sometimes up to 25, 30 people. Yeah. You know, people in the hallway, in the lounge room, in the roof. It was just a great time in life.
Yeah.
But from that, you know, I went to the Amsterdam Tattoo Convention before the London was on. Like Lal Hardy used to put on a big one with a bunch of other guys called Dunstable. And I was saying to someone the other day, it's the first time I've been somewhere where you've got gay people, lesbians, trannies, punks, skinheads, bikers, footy hooligans, normal people, high-end people, scumbags, all rolled into one, therefore tattooing.
Yeah.
It was like, for me, it was mind-blowing. And, you know, you had people like back in the day, a guy called Bernie Luther, I think Jack Rudy was there, Shotzi Gorman, Crazy Ace, Hanky Panky, just everyone that was anyone at that time were there, and it was just an amazing time.
You mentioned Lal Hardy, who I believe you worked for a period
a few
of time.
times I've done guest spots. I've never done a long-term stint with Lal, but so before I even travelled, I was friends with Bev Robinson, and she wrote Lal a letter, the pen friend era, saying, hey, my mate Reese is coming over to Australia. And that was a formal introduction back then. So, hey, you know, he's going to come and visit you. And I remember meeting Lal, and back then it was him, a guy called Martin Clark working there. And it was winter, so there were no job opportunities, but Lal had his fingers in lots of pies. So if he could get me a job, he would have. Yeah. And just sort of, you know, he had an affinity with Aussies. Kiwi Kim worked for him for a year. Another guy, Richard Carrier, worked for him in the early 90s as well. Like I think myself, a guy, Ado that works at Chapel worked there. Geordie Coles worked there. Quite a lot of Aussies have been through there over the years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Lal's probably up there with Trevor as one of the other people that I've used as a sounding board for tattooing and life as well.
Yeah, we're being so far away from home for, what was it, 8 years?
Yep.
Surely there would have had to have been times where you're like, this is fucked. I don't know if this is like a sustainable thing.
I don't think so. Like, not from memory. I've always been, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it done.
Yeah.
You know, there's never been like, back then I don't remember thinking like, if I couldn't get a job in a shop, I'm going to tattoo out of a backpacker squat. That's it.
Yeah.
As long as I'm tattooing, that's important, and something will happen, you know, and go from there. And thankfully things did happen.
As that kid that became obsessed with tattoos early on and hung around those sort of people and those people, What was it about tattoos that just like really tickled your fancy?
I can probably remember, I think about 11 or 12 years old, clearly thinking I don't want a normal life. And there weren't many options back then. Like you played footy or cricket or you're into rock music, or there weren't as many subculture variations as there are now. So, yeah, like I don't really know. I think it was tattooing. Like I was into cars and motorbikes. I think just hanging out with the local guys at the shop and the milk bar and, you know, seeing that stuff. Then someone gets a tattoo. Wow, that's cool. And then you go to the shop thinking, wow. Also remember as well, walking into that shop and seeing one of the guys like in their tracky pants pull out like a roll of money, thinking, holy fuck. But little did I realise that was probably his whole month's worth of takings.
Yeah.
But that was something that made me realise, well, you can maybe earn money out of this.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably the burning desire would have been to not have a normal life.
Yeah.
Is what pushed me or gave me the opportunity to pursue it.
Yeah, mission accomplished. I feel like you've done some shit.
It's been far from normal. I'm very, very fortunate, and you know, I've still got a long way to go. But if I was to keel over tomorrow and I could look down on myself, I'd go, "You give it a good crack."
Yeah, in the 29 years you've been tattooing, has there been like one particular hurdle that you found to be the hardest to sort of jump over?
Not real. Probably. Maybe homework, becoming a custom artist,
Yep.
doing a lot more stuff. First, say, 15 years of my career, I'm just a flash artist, a shop guy, because that's all it was, and I was very good at it. I was very fast, very technical. I could talk to people, get them in the chair, make good money. You know, one thing I learned early was from 96 or 7, I've never tattooed with a foot switch, because you can do more tattoos in a day without a foot switch, which ends up to a lot at the end of the week, the month, the year. So I think probably when I came to Sydney and worked at a shop called Innovision, after about being there for maybe 6 to 10 months, I started to develop a good clientele base. And with that came homework. And again, you didn't have the option of like downloading stuff or Instagram and screenshots, and didn't have a photocopier at home or Procreate. So homework was a lot more laborious than it is now. So I remember, you know, working 5 days a week and coming home and just drawing all night. And I found that probably the biggest hurdle to deal with, to work out a system that allowed me to still have a girlfriend, have a social life, you know, and not stagnate.
So with doing all your homework and stuff for all that, was it like Japanese homework, which is sort of what you're most known for now?
A mix of both. Innovision gave me the opportunity to develop that clientele. Like at that time, it was probably one of the leading shops, definitely the top 2 to 3. And then you had Tattoo Dharma, which every tattoo artist wanted to work at. That was the pinnacle.
So these are in Sydney now?
In Sydney, yes. Yeah. So for me then, like, I'm not a natural artist. I've had to work. I've got some natural ability, but I'm not great. I've had to work hard at it. So it would be getting critique from Trevor or getting critique from Cliff, saying, you know, we used to call them like a barley koi. Like, is that a barley koi? Because it's got a big eyebrow and like super long whiskers. Like, it's not a Japanese fish.
Yeah,
Japanese koi. So learning to do things and refine them, it just took time. Like, to gather reference was hard. Like, you know, back in the day when MySpace was a thing, like Gamenico Books, a girl called Crystal used to sell them out of Japan. Like, I've got a pretty extensive book collection, and I've always, I've never shied away about spending money back on tattooing. So, you know, like I've got a book, $200, $400, $600. But if you get one good design out of that you obviously you don't rip off 100%, you'll reference it.
Yeah.
Maybe add your waves or clouds or that sort of thing. It sort of pays itself off. So, yeah, just it was more time consuming.
I've always sort of thought that too, like the thought that you have to spend money to make money. And I feel like a lot of people aren't prepared to do that. They just expect to get something without having to invest anything into it.
Yep. Yeah, well, from me, what we spoke about before, that's obviously not the case. So for me, whether being passed some knowledge down, you felt like you've earned it, or you've earned good money from tattooing, spend it on a book that's realistically it's not going to go down in value either.
Yeah.
So and there is something special about turning a page and flicking through something. Like I now can go, oh, that book there, halfway through, it's a great design, this, that, and the other. At that time as well, learning things, I was still building my mental back catalogue of design images in my head. So, it's just a learning process, and it's just time that you have to put into it. Like even now, I've probably got about 5 books that I just regularly flick through once a week or twice a week or when I get time. And, I'm still discovering new things in them. So it's just re-educating yourself or keeping your mind fresh.
Yeah. So this brings us to your time in Sydney. So you worked at Innovision, then you worked at Tattoo Dharma.
Yep.
At what point did you decide to go out on your own and create Little Tokyo?
Tattoo Dharma got firebombed. So I got a call in the morning going, don't come to work today.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right. And obviously some stuff had been going on that we were aware of.
Yeah.
So I just went, all right. I called my morning appointment and cancelled him. And I was living in a super small apartment on Bondi Road in Bondi. And I just flipped the mattress and I turned that place into a studio.
Yep.
And I ended up tattooing out of there from that afternoon for probably 3.5 years.
What year was this?
I think next April is probably 10 years that Tattoo Dharma went up. So
yeah,
about that time.
So from turning your apartment into the first iteration of Little Tokyo, how long had you sort of done that before you opened a shop space?
Whenever the New South Wales tattoo licensing laws came in, I think it's probably 6 to 7 years ago, something like that.
I think it came in right when I started tattooing.
Yep.
In the year that I started tattooing. I feel like it was maybe 5 or 6.
Okay, well there you go. So around then, and I just knew I looked into. I looked into getting the space legal as far as, it was zone mixed use, getting it passed by the health department, but it was just never going to happen. And I just knew that I was, without sounding like a knob, I was too well known that if I flouted the law, someone was going to grasp me up.
Yep.
So I just thought, all right, what am I going to do? And then I started looking around the city, and obviously at that time to get a studio was extremely hard because there'd been, the laws were brought in for a reason. There'd been, so many arson attacks and shootings and that sort of thing that no landlord wanted to put a tattoo shop in.
Yeah.
So I ended up lucky enough finding a landlord that was willing to, because his space had been vacant for 3 years. So I went into there in Bondi Junction and I was there for just over 3 years.
Do you reckon he was also more willing because it was more of like a private studio environment as opposed to like a shop front, like street shop type
Totally,
environment?
yeah. I had to put in like a business proposal, and it said things like, I even part of the DA from the police, I had to have a certain amount of cameras on front doors, back doors, stairwells, face recognition, all this sort of business.
Yep.
Appointment only, had to buzz to get in. So when you put your finger on the buzzer, they'd take a photo, all this stuff that gave the landlord reassurance. And then obviously being able to get insurance as well. And at the end of the day, he was a businessman, so he smelt money.
Yeah. So from going like tattooing in your apartment, did any part of you sort of just miss tattooing with other people?
Oh, for sure. I used to get cabin fever. I'd quite regularly do guest spots. I'd come down here and work at Trev's at Dynamic. I still travelled quite extensively. Like I'd go away to Europe regularly to get my fix, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That time I think my back was getting finished maybe. Or no, way well finished well and truly. But yeah, basically I'd come down to Trev's and work here, and that would be my inspiration and travel. In the end, a guy called Paul Surridge ended up working with me 1 day a week. So that was good. But yeah, you just stagnate. Like my routine back then used to be, all right, blogs had just sort of started coming out. So I'd get online every morning, my routine, I'd do what I had to do. I'd come to work, I'd music on, lights on, I'd get on my computer, emails, And then I'd look at blogs from different tattoo sites or tattoo artists to try and get inspiration.
Yeah.
Like my my shop career's never really been a decision. I've kind of been pushed into making these decisions until the last move.
Yeah.
Well, I was pushed, but I made a decision. So Tattoo Dharma pushed me to do my own thing. Tattoo license laws pushed me to open a shop. Then in Bondi Junction, it was next to an illegal rub and tug joint. There was another one 2 doors down.
Yeah.
It was in a big strata building. I get a call from the landlord, okay, we've got a problem, blah, 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 chatted away. The strata insurance went up by 170 grand, so you've got to pay your share of it, which is impossible.
Yeah.
They gave me 3 choices: close your business completely, change the nature of your business, or pay your share of the money. So long story short, I moved from there, and then I've moved to my current location, and then the nightmare of trying to get a studio again ensued. Thankfully, I ended up where I am now, and it was a larger space, and I just decided that rather than try and replicate what I had, I'm just going to put my balls on the line and go from there and try and create something bigger and better and nicer.
Yeah, because where you are now, you're Elizabeth Street in Surrey Hills, like really close to Central Station.
Yep, totally. And I believe I did things the right way as well. Like, I went around to all the shops in the city and said, hey guys, look, this is a situation. I'm getting kicked out of where I am. I've tried to find somewhere else in Bondi Junction. There's nothing around. This is one of the only places that's going to take me, and it boiled it down to it would. Thankfully, there's previously, well, still there, another studio called Hibernia run by Dean Carlisle.
It's an amazing shop.
It is, and I've been lucky to have a good relationship with Dean over the years. So thankfully, he gave me the go-ahead. So I moved in there, but I went and spoke to Tony Cohen, Monarch, Dean.
Yeah, Tony Cohen, Illustrated Man, is just down the street, isn't it?
Yes, 100%.
It's like an iconic shop.
It is, totally. And I got a lot of respect for Tony. And the funny thing was, when I went in there to talk to him and his son Brett, they're like, Tony's like, you doing a street shop? I'm like, no, up on the 5th floor. He's gone, oh, good. And he's gone, you know what? You're the first person that's come and spoke to us.
Yeah.
I hope you do really well and you shut them cunts down.
Fuck yeah.
Because no one's actually come in and said, oh, hey, mate.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm going to open up the road from you.
It's just courtesy, hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been taught very good morals. Life's pretty simple. And I believe if you do these basic steps, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And you would want those repaid to you.
Oh, totally. So what sort of advice would you have for people that might have a little side hustle, a little business that they're sort of starting out in their bedroom or their apartment, and how over the years to grow? I mean, you said that you were sort of pushed into making these choices, but what have you learned from expanding and then expanding again?
What I've learned now is it's just nonstop work, and I'm not scared to spend the money that I get from the artists in the shop and actually my own money. To move, I had to remortgage an apartment to do it. Don't be scared. You've got to, pay to play sort of thing.
Yeah.
My accountant probably thinks I'm ridiculous, but an accountant will never understand a creative industry. They don't understand that it's coming from the heart.
Yep.
And I believe if you believe in it, and you work hard and you're good to people and you're decent to people and you've got a good product, like I'm massive on customer service, you're going to do well. So for me, it's just trying anything and everything. Sydney's no longer in the grip of a biker war. It's like an advertising war, and I'm lucky I've got friends that are in the advertising industry or in other industries that I can bounce off and feed off. And will help me out, and I help them out in certain things. So just try everything, really, and then you work out what is going to work or not.
Right, and sort of have a bit of a calculated risk.
I've always done an uncalculated risk.
Uncalculated?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I've got the belief in myself that it'll work. And even if, say, for example, now something massive happened in the shop and everyone left, I could afford to keep it rolling on my own. I wouldn't be having holidays or anything like that, but I could pay my mortgage, pay my rent, keep my head above water. So
Yeah. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
I don't think it will.
You got a
Hopefully
fucking
not.
amazing team.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate, very fortunate.
How many people are in there now?
Believe it or not, there's 15 and we've got 2 counter staff and a fill-in staff.
It's mental.
Yeah, it is. Like I look around sometimes and go, how did this happen?
Yeah.
A few reasons. Like I've got a bunch of people that all work together, and now we're in a position where don't really have to advertise. Like people want to come.
Yeah.
So when a position comes up, I'll be in contact, or someone else will be, or push them this way, and it seems to work. And you know, I make a real point of I'm not comfortable with being the boss. Like so, and I think people respect me because I'm still in the trenches as well, working my ass off and trying to get better and loving tattooing. Bit different that the boss man just turns up and gets the money and doesn't care,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah.
So, whilst being an Australian tattoo history buff, you don't really seem to be stuck in the past. You know what I mean? In terms of like how you run your business and how you celebrate
Yep.
up and comers just as much as you do sort of established artists. How do you separate tattooing into how it used to be and how it is now, aside from like the obvious like technology stuff that we talked about earlier?
I think when I look at my career in 2 parts, like starting out traveling overseas and then coming back. So when I came back, I worked for a guy called Paul Braniff on the Gold Coast, and he was a very progressive thinker as far as tattooing went. You know, Skin Effects at that time, I think had 6 bays. We were running 2 shifts. I was doing a night shift, like 5 at night till midnight or later. And he ran a really tight crew, very business savvy. And from Paul, I learned routine, structure, basically being an adult and being professional. So I think if I look back prior to traveling, it was just, if back then as well, if you just put a signed tattoo above a door, you were probably going to be busy.
Yeah.
People had come in, and it was just very, in general, it wasn't as structured as it is today.
So before you worked for Paul Braniff, it was very like fast and loose.
Yeah, just street shop, like bang, people come in. I remember one shop I worked in, people would call up. We wouldn't even answer the phone because we were that busy.
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't even go to the toilet. Like we had a sink in the corner and you'd literally kick people out, close the door, piss in the sink, pour Dettol down it and then open up again and keep tattooing because it'd take you 15 minutes to get out and go to the toilet and back.
Whoa.
Which is lost money.
Yeah.
Like ridiculous, but that's what it was.
Totally. So working for Braniff, he sort of taught you professionalism in a way and sort of how to run a business?
In all honesty, at that point in my career, I actually thought that the chance of even owning a shop was impossible.
Why?
Biker domination.
Right.
Yeah.
So this shop was up on the Gold Coast.
On the Gold
wasn't
Coast,
it?
yeah. I was there for about 3.5 years, and my first day working at one of his other shops called Crossfire, I went down there to start my day, all the front windows smashed out. I remember walking through going, guess this is a good day to start, hey, Paul? And he's like, oh, mate, that's just the way it is.
Wow.
You know, and that was called Crossfire because the shop was literally caught in the crossfire of a biker turf war.
Totally.
You know, Paul wasn't a biker. He's just not going to pay.
Yeah. I think that the connection between you and I, which people listening probably aren't aware of, is a man called Brian Brady.
Yes, braids.
So Brian used to own Conspiracy Tattoo before the man who apprenticed me, Dan, bought it from him. So I've known Brian for as long as I've been getting tattooed.
Yep.
And then I was dating a girl who moved to Sydney for uni, and I was going to visit her, and Brian's like, oh, you need to go visit my mate Reese at Little Tokyo when you're at the Bondi Junction shop. So I was like, oh, all right. So I went there, I met you. You you were in between appointments. I think you're waiting on your guy to show up, and you gave me the time of day, and you sat down and you treated me the same as I feel like you would treat someone that had been tattooing 10, 20 years, which was greatly appreciated. And we just sort of nerded out on tattoo and backgrounds and all that sort of stuff. And then your customer showed up, and I'm like, fuck, I got to go. And then you're like, no, stay, hang out.
Yeah.
And then I made it my mission every time I went to Sydney that I'd stop by Little Tokyo, I'd pop my head in, I'd say hey, and I attribute that to Brian. So you worked with Brian. You worked with him in Europe as well.
Yeah, I worked with him. I was living in Amsterdam for a couple of years, and so was he. And we worked one day a week together at a shop out of this. He was in Noordwijk. I was in Amsterdam. We worked in the south a bit at a guy called Ian's shop. And I remember being in there one day and going, there's a fucking jar of Vegemite here. Whose is that? And he's like, oh, that's Brian's. Oh, I forgot to tell you, he's an Aussie, blah, blah, blah. And then we ended up meeting, and then we ended up working a couple of conventions together in Holland, and then came back and we worked at Skin Effects together. So, yeah, I've known Brian for a long time. Yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah. I feel like he sort of fits that mold of those older tattooers that you're talking
100%.
about.
100%. He's a grumpy old fucker. Yeah, like
your words, not mine.
Yeah. But that's what it is. And, you got to remember those guys as well. Like at Skin Effects, we're tattooing 10 to 20 people a day.
Yeah.
Like it's fast paced. And a lot of those guys aren't people.
Yeah.
So sit still, shut up, fuck off, this, that, and the other. Like it was amazing. Like, like I've worked with a lot of people, and this is in not a reference to Brian, but a lot of people have showed me what not to do.
Yeah.
Like how to fuck up your life, this, that, and the other. Brian taught me a lot of drawing stuff. He's a very good technical artist as well, a lot of painting tips as well. I got a lot of good stories about Braid. Like one of my favourites, we're at Skin Effects and we used to sit out in the back room, and then you just take the next one that come in.
Yeah.
So the counter comes in, all right, this guy's got a little bit of tribal, hands it over to Braid. He's like, oh, fuck, really? And he walks out into the waiting room holding up the stencil and goes, all right, who's getting this piece of shit? And like this 18-year-old kid's first tattoo. And like, who's getting this? He looks up and then his body language just crushed.
Yeah.
Probably never got another tattoo in his life.
Yeah.
But that was that era. Like, you're dealing with tourists, you're dealing with drunks, you're dealing with this, that and the other, getting shit that you don't want to do, little Cherry Creek butterflies, unicorns, dolphins. Like I'm responsible for thousands of armbands and tramp stamps.
Responsible?
And not all of them good or straight.
Being the Gold Coast, you're also responsible for many, many schoolies tats.
Yeah, schoolies was a good time. Like I used to just, and this is the mad thing, right? Like my missus said to me the other night, what's the craziest thing you've done? And I went, like, I don't even know. There's not one. There's just thousands. And it just becomes normal to you. Like, I remember one time at school, he's tattooing this kid, and there's a photo of it somewhere where he's getting something on his ass. So I like made him bend over a chair and like dacked him. And there's like 30 people in a waiting room, 6 bays full of people getting tattooed. Did the tattoo on him, got the Vaseline stick full of Vas, and just caked it up his ass, pulled his boxes up, slapped him on the ass, said, all right, mate, you're good to go.
Off he went.
He loved it. The crowd was cheering, like just insane moments that you couldn't do now.
Yeah. What's your record for the most tattoos you've done in a day?
I think 23.
23.
Yeah, and that was in London at a shop called Skin Flash in the basement of a market called Kensington Market. My counter guy used to put the stencils on and then bandage them up. And I just tattoo. Like you're doing... But these tattoos are small. You're doing like 8 kanjis a day.
Yeah.
Butterflies, bits of spaghetti tribal, just shit.
I would have for sure thought that it would have been during schoolies, but it was...
No, schoolies was a nightmare, mate. Like schoolies, locals didn't want to come in.
Yeah.
And schoolies are tight asses. They don't got money to pay for a tattoo.
Shop minimum.
So they're maybe going to get, minimum or a piercing.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with like drunk 17, 18-year-olds. It's,
crazy.
Not as... The tattoo side of it wasn't as busy as what you would think.
Yeah, don't
Indie Carnival would be pretty busy. I remember one time Paul going to us, all right, guys, because more shops had started opening and we were on the 3rd floor. So, you had street level shops then going, all right, guys, got to throw our morals out the windows this weekend. As long as they can sign their name on the consent form, they're good to go.
Yeah.
You know, so you're just tattooing drunks all night long, you know. But the good thing about that is if you're a good, capable, efficient tattooer, you can slam them out. Oh, mate, where are you from? Oh, from Adelaide. Cool, sweet. Yeah. Next.
There you go. Yeah.
Yep.
Do you miss that at all?
Not really. Like I've lucky to have worked in some really busy shops for long periods of time. I don't have the energy anymore.
Yeah.
Like 2 nights ago, me and Caleb from Tattoo Rosies, we did a Sailor Jerry event, and from 5:30 till midnight, we both did like 14 tattoos each. So it's like, you know, it's nice to know I've still got it.
Yeah.
But I've got no desire to go back to that.
Yeah,
if I had to, I could.
Yeah.
But do I want to? No.
Yeah, you've paid your dues.
Yeah. And you get, you know, you definitely get more crazy interactions in those environments and that sort of stuff.
For sure. I think one time you were telling me about when you were up on the Goldie tattooing some lady that came in with a gimp.
Yeah, it's this dominatrix ring. And I used to be the guy that, oh, this is one for Reese, you know, like.
Yeah, for sure.
So, oh, hey, there's someone on the phone. Hey, how are you? I've got this long-term client. I want to get my brand tattooed on him, blah, blah, blah. Will you hurt him? Will you tattoo here? And I'm like, yeah.
Will you hurt him?
Yeah, but she wanted me to do her brand like in between his nuts and his ass. And I went, yeah, cool, $2,000. She's gone, no, that's way too much. I've gone, well, that's my price.
Yeah.
In the end, she brought him into the shop on a Friday night on a dog lead on all fours. And like I ended up, just because of her budget, you know, I ended up tattooing her logo on his like shoulder blade.
Yeah.
You know, and she's standing there and scratching him, and it's just becomes, the insanity becomes normal.
Yeah.
That it's like nothing can really shock you in the end. You become, I don't know, not numb to it, but blasé about it.
I definitely feel like I look forward to those moments so I've got the story.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to put up with the unpleasantness for an hour or whatever it is just so I've got the fucking story.
Yeah. I think probably the best one I've done, I tattooed a snake out of a chick's ass in London.
Nice.
And the weird thing is my boss at that time was telling us a story how he did the cobra head coming out of the front like 15 years earlier.
Yeah.
And how afterwards he took her back to the hotel and made sweet love and all that sort of
Sweet
stuff.
love.
So she comes in 15 years later and about 15 stone later.
Oh, same one, same person.
Coincidentally wanting to get it finished. Where's Andy? Oh, he's not here. Oh, blah, blah, blah. So I had my shop counter guy stretching her open, and I started right on the bullseye and didn't budge, and to get the story, basically.
Went from a cobra to a brown snake.
Yeah, 15-minute tattoo, and I think I charged her something like £300, which back then was the equivalent of about 900 Australian dollars.
Yeah.
You know, I was like 22.
Yeah, something's going to pay for the counselling that you
a lot
undertake.
of self-medication.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and I clearly remember like, no worries, whatever.
That's mental.
Yeah.
Worth it in the end.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I've got a little bit of a challenge for you.
Yep. Physical?
20 push-ups, drop them. So being the face behind Australian Tattoo History, the Instagram page, a publication as well. You did like
a couple of years ago, did a little self-published magazine. I've done a bunch of like talks at conventions and little seminars and at, you know, like local libraries and museums. So yeah, it's a good platform.
All right. So can you name 3 tattooers from the 90s or prior and how they've impacted you and how you do shit today?
For me, number one is obviously Tattoo Charlie, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be tattooing.
The guy that you sort of apprenticed under?
Yep, totally. So he, you know, if it wasn't for him, you know, I've got a lot to be thankful for. You know, he instilled some good values in me, you know, cleanliness being one of them. Then the next one would obviously have to be, and these are like direct impacts onto me, would be Kenny Mack from Flame and Guns at the shop in Brunswick, you know, giving me a chance at a professional shop. And, you know, I remember even getting tattooed by Trevor at that point, and Trevor goes, oh, what's you know, Kenny think about you getting tattooed? I said, mate, he's rapped for me, you know, because it's, you know, obviously Trevor was like a higher rung on the ladder than Kenny was. And Kenny was very like open, like, you get tattooed by whoever you want. You learn as much as you can. I can only show you so much.
Yeah.
You know, and also Kenny giving me that push to go overseas.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember at that time he said, mate, if it doesn't work out, you can always come back and your job will be here.
That's awesome.
So, you know, Kenny's someone that I've always asked for advice as well. And then obviously Trevor. You know, Trevor's, you know, in that period, like showed me a different way that, you know, you don't have to be a tough guy. You don't have to be a bogan. You don't have to be a drunk or a junkie or all of those things rolled into one. You can just be a good person and you can be yourself and you can just love tattooing and want to get better and do great work and treat people well.
Yeah, that's so good. And on the inverse, 3 current tattooers still working today that have impacted on you.
Current tattooers would be Paul Braniff, who's no longer here, rest his soul. For when I got a job at Skin Effects, it was like when I was younger, one of those unattainable dreams. So for me to get a job there with Paul gave me, or I don't know, justified or gave, I'm not sure the right word, but gave me the confidence that, you know, I was doing okay.
That sort of affirmation.
Yeah, an affirmation that, all right, someone that I actually really respect, and I'd been tattooed by like 8 years before, this is like a weird dream that's coming true.
Yeah.
So definitely Paul, Mayo, who works here in Melbourne. Mayonnaise, yep. He's just about to open his own shop in Collingwood called Capital Tattoo. He's been a good friend of mine, like one of my closest friends for probably coming up to 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
Like he always stays at my house. Like my missus loves him. Everyone at the shop does. So I contacted him to paint the stairwell at my old studio.
Yes.
So I'd never met him before, slid into his DMs as you do. He got back to me, came up and just clicked. Like he comes from a very similar, I think I've been tattooing maybe 10 years longer than him, but we come from a similar sort of lineage sort of way, like a rough start to tattooing and all the rest of it. So he gets it. He's definitely not entitled, but he's a powerhouse and an amazing work ethic.
Yeah, he does like sort of this crazy, almost like it's not Tibetan, but like this sort of calligraphy.
Yeah, it's got an Eastern Arabic feel. And, you know, what I love about him is to have your own artistic voice in tattooing is extremely difficult. You know, he's got that, but he's also got it in the art world, whether it be graffiti. You know, now he just had a sold out first ever solo show here at the Rialto in Melbourne. You know, so he's a powerhouse that's pushed me just by his raw energy and being around him and positivity.
To do things like inside and outside of tattooing?
Yeah, like he's always saying to me, you got to paint more, and that's my new mission. Like at my old studio, I painted a big wave on the side of the wall there.
Yeah, it was sort of like as you go up the staircase, there would be the wall on the right-hand side that Mayo painted with his lettering all the way up. And then on the opposite side of the staircase were all these like Japanese finger waves that you painted all the way up.
So he, I said, oh, mate, can you do it? And he's like, get fucked, you can do it yourself. I'm like, oh, really?
I'm not painting 2 walls.
Yeah, and basically pushed me to do it. So we sat down and we drew it out and we, you know, it was like a mad drunk night at the shop. We cut off the back of a stencil carrier because we didn't have any, you know, perspex or contact, whatever, to put onto the projector machine, drew the waves on, projected it on the wall, and then penciled it in. He mixed up the paint. It was me, him, and Yoshi that used to work with me, and we all sat there and did it. And then, you know, I ended up doing the whole thing, so it was good.
It was a cracking way to enter a shop too.
Yeah.
As soon as you walk in that door, that tiny little door that had Little Tokyo Temple of Art on it in Bondi Junction, and as you're walking up, you're literally drowning in art on your way up the stairs from both sides.
I've always loved shops that are cluttered and have got so much to look at. To me, that's a proper tattoo shop.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on an angle. That painting, the Little Tokyo on the front door, was a direct mimic of the logo Big Trouble in Little China from the movies.
Yes. Is that a Kurt Russell movie?
Yeah. Like one of my all-time favourites. Hence, you know, my company's called Little Tokyo Trading Co., which is a reference to something in Big Trouble in Little China. I got the name Little Tokyo. Josh Rowlink came and visited me maybe a year or so later. Came to my old shop, and it was on the 7th floor in an apartment. You'd walk down the hallway, and it was very, very Japanese style. And he walked in, he's like, wow, this is like something out of Little Tokyo. And I went, bang, there's my name.
Rad.
So, and I sort of stuck with it. Been running off that since around 2013, I think.
Yeah.
So.
And like when you walk into like the Little Tokyo then and the Little Tokyo now, there is stuff everywhere. It's just
Yeah,
all these
I'm very
little,
big on experience and presentation. Like I'm very...
It's almost a museum.
Yeah. The current one now is scaled down.
Yeah.
Like I've tried to be a bit more adult and not indulge in my own personal fantasies. So I like to think it's still got that cluttered art feel, but it's very big and open. But yeah, I'm very big on presentation and being house proud and having a clean shop and, you know, nice stuff in the bathroom and, you know, bins aren't overflowing and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you've got like aftershave and hairspray in the bathroom.
100%. We got moisturiser, aftershave, hairspray, deodorant, Listerine, you name it, you got it.
Little butler that like dries your hands for you.
Well, it's just a little bit out of the price range or the, you know, it's too expensive with health and safety these days.
That's so good. Why, well, I mean, sounds like a weird question, but why so fascinated with Australian tattoo history?
I've always liked it and always pretty much kept most of the stuff from time I started. I've got my first machines, designs, all that sort of thing. It's just I've always been told and taught to respect my elders. So, you know, there's a couple of sayings, but, you know, basically, you know, you need to know where you come from to know where you're going, and you've got to pay homage to these guys. Like they paved the way. They've done their time in the trenches and dealt with all the shitty things that tattooing threw at them for us now to have it the best it's ever been and the easiest it's ever been.
Yeah.
You know, like they've had to deal with so much stuff and people that actually pushed themselves when they didn't have to. They've helped elevate tattooing. So my fascination from that, and then probably a few years ago, Lel Hardy came out. He'd been corresponding with lots of people over the years. So we went and visited Bev Robinson. We went and saw Trevor. You know, in Sydney, we went and visited Greg Ardren, and Greg's was running a guy called Bob Wood's old studio out in East Hills. And that studio had been running since 1957, and it was in like a converted like little granny flat out the back. And Greg's house was like a museum of tattooing.
Yeah.
Something like 400 or 500 tattoo machines, all this memorabilia, everything categorised, photo albums, newspaper clippings. And at the end of that trip, we came and saw you guys in Wagga, had dinner with you guys and Braid. He sort of said to me, mate, like, no one's really doing it. Brett Stewart's doing his thing and he's got an amazing collection, but I said, no one's doing anything really actively online, like Instagram, for example.
True.
So...
Which is where everyone looks now.
The younger generation, for sure. Like if you look at demographics, like, you know, 40 plus are more Facebookers, this, that and the other, but younger is definitely Instagram. So he just sort of said to me, you should try, and, you know Tony, you know Greg, you know Bev, you should try and start getting some sort of, if not verbal or visual sort of record of what it is. And thankfully it's sort of snowballed quite well.
There was an interview with you where you said that you feel like you're too young for the old guys and too old for the young guys.
Yeah.
But all those sort of older, the generation before you sort of trust that you're in it for the right reasons, and they're willing to hand some incredible stuff over to you for the collection that you've now got. Yeah,
like the first time I met Tony Cohen, he pretty much snubbed me. And Tony, you know, was renowned for being quite standoffish with tattooers. You know, I've developed quite a good friendship with him, and now, you know, he said to me that, of course he was like that back in the day, because he was like, he'd look at someone's work, and if he felt that they didn't love tattooing or weren't good or wanting to improve, why the fuck would he waste his time on them?
Yeah.
You know, like you're not any good for tattooing, so I don't have to be nice and talk to you. So, but thankfully now he's warmed to me and mellowed, and, you know, like I can talk to things to him about that maybe not many other people can, and, you know, bring back memories, and, you know, just it's nice.
Yeah. I feel like I'm guilty of not holding on to anything. Even as soon as I do a tattoo, I toss the drawing when I'm done with it and doesn't exist anymore. And then I think of all those guys where they kept everything. And like you were saying, like you kept like your first machine, like all these sort of things. Had like, what do you think is going to be the future of Australian tattoo history now that everything's done on iPads and stuff, and no one's really keeping artifacts anymore?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a resurgence in it. Like here in Melbourne, you've got, Pete, obviously, that you work for's into the history. Fergus has got a good collection at Melbourne Tattoo Co.
But that's still history from that bygone era.
Yeah, my bad.
As far as like what this generation
there's
of tattooists
going to be a lot of stuff
behind.
stored on iPads.
Galleries of iPads.
Yep, totally. But that's not just tattooing. Everything's disposable now.
Yeah.
We're not the only industry that's affected by it. Like, say a graphic designer or a draftsman, there's probably no hand-drawn draft or architect plans anymore. Everything's done online as well.
Yeah.
So I think as well with things as far as like, to hold a tattoo machine from the 1920s or the 1950s, like that's pretty magical.
Yeah.
Who's going to want to hold a pen from someone? It just gets thrown into, and I use pens now, like they're done, that's it. Like, throw it away.
Yeah.
Like no one's going to care that I used it.
Yeah.
So it's like, because it's nothing.
I'm sure those guys back then didn't think that anyone would care.
For sure, some did, some didn't. Some were very, could see that it will become valuable at some point and did keep it and collect it. But I just think now, unless you're, say, for example, a trad tattooer and you're painting up your own flash, even stencils, no one does hand stencils. I've got tons of hand stencils. People are maybe drawing with Texta on tracing paper, which is cool. You do your little scrapbooks or your flash book sort of thing. But I think it'll be probably, for the majority, it'll be Japanese tattooers and traditional tattooers that keep that actual artwork alive.
Yeah.
A lot of maybe neo-trad or realism, it's obviously going to be in a digital format. They might do a painting, but it's not going to be as prolific as, say, a trad or a Japanese tattooer.
Yeah.
But there definitely will be trad guys and Jap guys that don't do that.
Me.
They're iPad. Yeah, of course. And so what?
Yeah.
So what?
I don't know. I love the thought of being able to leave something behind, and then I just don't do it.
Yeah.
So I should probably
Can't mean that
do
much
it.
to you then.
Oh, fuck. That was the equivalent of like your mum saying, I'm not mad, just disappointed.
Well, yeah, me and Cole that I work with up at the shop, like we were in China together recently and we're talking to Dong Dong, who's a big friend and influence of mine, and we're both going, when we get back, we're going to have to paint. And, he's a small man, but very big power.
Yeah.
And he turns around to us and he's going, lots of people like things. Not many people love things.
True.
And that was the same thing I just gave you.
Yeah.
It was like, you know what? Here's me in China. I've just seen all these paintings. Being a wanker gun, we're going to go home and paint. And the message I got from that was exactly, it's easy to say things, but it's harder to actually do it. So
Definitely.
now I'm trying to paint and I'm trying to stay consistent at it.
Yeah.
And not that I need to prove anything to him, but I need to prove it to myself. And because if that's what I want to do, I've got to do it rather than just talk shit.
Totally. And keeping yourself busy outside of your sort of one of your main focus, which is tattooing.
Yep.
Keeping yourself busy with hobbies and interests outside of that as well. I think you're huge on that in the the tattoo history is a hobby or an obsession of yours.
Yeah, I'm quite fortunate. I don't have kids. My partner's very understanding. She's very obsessed with her own job. She's a photographer.
She's an amazing photographer.
Yeah, she's good, and she's doing really well in her career. So I've got a lot of mutual understanding. We don't have a partner that doesn't understand the creative side of things, and I enjoy it. And if you enjoy something, you don't not have to do it, or you shouldn't feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
It's not as if I'm playing pokies or, I've spent enough time in pubs and clubs over the years.
Yeah.
That this is, and when you get a bit older as well, you realise that the finish line's getting closer than the starting line was. So you kind of want to maybe make the most of it.
Yeah. I think what I like about you the most This sounds like it's going to get weird. It's not, I promise.
A love story.
Is that you've been tattooing like 29 years and stuff. And I think you told me like not even that long ago, you feel like you're just getting started.
Yeah, I love it more now than ever because I'm in a position where the shop's doing quite well. You know, I've been lucky enough to maintain a good client base over the years. I've got good customers. Like now I've got a great creative team in the shop that I can feed off. I'm able to travel a lot as well and continue the inspiration. So I think now, like next year, I'm a workaholic anyway. I always have been. Like I delivered newspapers from 8 years old. So I've been instilled a good work ethic. So I can't not work.
Yeah.
But I'm lucky I enjoy it and I have an understanding partner. So
are you the same in the sense as me where you look at people that don't really have ambition or motivation and just can't particularly relate to them? Do you find it hard to relate to people that aren't ambitious?
Probably at some point in my career I did, but now I just try and surround myself with positive people. And you've got to remember as well, without getting too deep, that not everyone has the opportunity we do. So if you're working in a factory and you're not a mad footy supporter or you're not following the V8 supercars or something, or you've got no interest, it's probably quite easy to just get lost in life.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe they then find it hard to relate to people, which we will find hard to relate to them. So for me, I just try and surround myself with positive people that I can learn from and get something from. So no frustration, no.
No frustration.
Yes.
Zen as fuck.
Yep.
Well, Reese,
Yep.
I think this is a pretty good spot to sort of wrap it up.
Cool.
Thank you so much for flying down.
My pleasure.
Doing the podcast, then
Yep.
chuffing off again straight after.
Yeah, it's good. It's been good.
I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the time that you've spent talking to me over the years,
Yep.
including this hour and a
Yeah,
bit.
there'll be more to come.
There'll be more to come. Go Get Tattooed by Reese Gordon and the whole crew at Little Tokyo in Sydney. You'd be a fool not to. Reese, thank you very much.
You're welcome.